Hi, I'm Ashley, and today we will be talking about Japanese classical music. So that involves the history, instruments, characteristics, and evolution of Japanese music. The earliest musical artifact of Japan is the dotaku, which is a bronze bell that was used during the Yayoi period between 300 BCE and 250 CE. This was during the period where tribes began to migrate to the islands of Japan from northern Asia. Despite being used occasionally as a percussion instrument, dotakus mainly served as non-functional pieces of decoration in rituals, which makes sense because they didn't have a very resonant sound. This is what they sounded like. Another ancient instrument from 300 BCE is the Yamato goto, which has 6 strings and movable boards and is very similar to the koto. But unlike the koto, which was derived from a Chinese instrument, the Yamato goto is a native Japanese instrument. It is also narrower and has fewer strings than a koto, which has 13 strings. And a Yamato goto strings are not tuned from low to high pitch like a normal string instrument, but its strings have a rather quirky order of tuning, similar to how a ukulele strings are tuned. A common Yamato goto playing technique is to roll through all the strings like a glissando and instantly mute all the strings with one's hand, except the last string, therefore letting that last string resonate. Nowadays, the Yamato goto is only used in gagaku orchestras. This is what a Yamato goto sounds like. Fast forward to about 1000 CE, the gagaku came to existence, and is essentially a form of artistic expression that involves traditional Japanese music and dances, and it has been passed down throughout the generations of the imperial family. It is a fusion of elements from music brought to Japan from the ancient civilizations of China and Korea for about 5 centuries, around the time where Buddhism began to spread throughout the country. There are 3 forms of gagaku, which include kangen, which was the instrumental performances, bugaku, which involved more dancing and celebration, and kayo, which consisted of songs and poetry. Some gagaku instruments other than the Yamato goto include sho, hichiriki, hue, koto, and biwa. The sho is like a small organ that is blown into, and the sound is very shrill but soft and often described as having an otherworldly sound. It was also said that the instrument was designed to imitate the call of a phoenix, which is why 2 of the pipes make no sound and are there for the aesthetics, and also demonstrate 2 wings. This is what the sho sounds like. The hichiriki is a double reed wind instrument and closely resembles that of an oboe. In fact, it sounds like an oboe, but even more shrill and like a duck. Here's what it sounds like. Fue is also known as a Japanese bamboo flute, and the sound closely resembles that of a piccolo because of how shrill it is and less versatile with vibrato. This is the sound of a fue. The koto is similar to a harp and has 13 strings, although some of them can have as many as 25 strings. The sound is naturally more staccato than a harp, and the pitch is adjusted with the movable boards, which sometimes you can hear the pitch bending when the note is still resonating. Here's the sound of a 25-string koto. The biwa has a similar look to a mandolin, but the strings are very low-pitched and tend to rattle when strung. Here's what it sounds like. Now for the gagaku percussion instruments. The kakko drum is a double-headed sideways drum that has a somewhat hollow sound, and the taiko drum is a huge drum that has a thick and penetrating booming sound. The shoko is a bronze gong struck with 2 horn beaters. Its sound is deep and resonates for a long time. Its overtones are very present, making the gong sound like a huge chord. Here's what a shoko sounds like. The san no tsuzumi drum is a 2-headed drum shaped like an hourglass, and is played with one's hands. Its sound is very rattly and similar to that of woodblocks. Here's what a san no tsuzumi sounds like. Here is a video of a gagaku performance with some of the instruments we just learned about. Gagaku was primarily used for court functions at the imperial palace, But in the 1860s, Japan was forcibly exposed to Western customs, including many Western musicians who came to Japan to teach, perform, and lead ensembles, thus spreading their Western music propaganda, which the Meiji government accepted and began efforts to cultivate Western music practices. They established military bands and set up music instruction for all grade levels, and also assigned people from the Gagaku Orchestra to learn Western instruments, notation, and repertoire. However, Japanese and Western music had very different style, aesthetics, and functions. While the Romantic period of European music was heavily sentimental, lyrical, and personal, focusing on emotions and self-expression, Gagaku music rather exemplified emotional restraint, as music was severely restricted to performing for officials in formal ceremonies. Instrumentation was often sparse and limited to small ensembles of traditional Japanese instruments, unlike in Romantic European music, where orchestration was continuing to be expanded into large symphonies. Gagaku, on the other hand, kept the instrumentation small in order to emphasize tone qualities, or timbres, and also its sophisticated philosophy of silences called ma. Ma is a Japanese concept which refers to negative empty space, as in the space, time, or interval between objects. For the longest time, Japan has valued minimalism as an aesthetic element, which is evident in their architecture, interior design, and other forms of artwork. Ma is also very present in traditional Japanese music, as you will hear silence or stillness between sounds or movements. These gaps exist for a subtle emotional impact to create suspense between phrases and relief when the next phrase begins. Sometimes there are even longer gaps of silence that separate sounds entirely, which adds to a meditative quality in Japanese music. Timbre is also an important element in traditional Japanese music and is used with lots of purpose. In Western music, tempered scales are the standard for composition, where instruments were designed to play all the chromatic tones with a consistent timbre. Woodwind instruments were also manufactured to achieve this ability too, which is why they have buttons instead of holes now. The goal in Western music was to equalize the timbre throughout the entire pitch range of the instrument. However, Japanese music did not put as much emphasis on pitch, and rather embraced the different timbres that came as a result of the different pitch registers, and their music was developed to accommodate to the timbres. The idea of timbre also relates to another essential concept in Japanese aesthetics, which is wabi-sabi, an emphasis on natural simplicity or flawed beauty. In a musical context, this means that the Japanese embrace the natural sound of the instrument and accept its imperfections rather than trying to fix them. While it is not an official element of Japanese music, it is still important for those with a Western ear to appreciate the concept and the execution of sound as a natural quality of art. Pottery items are another huge example of wabi-sabi, as bowls might be cracked or chipped, but nevertheless still beautiful and used in the most refined and formal tea ceremonies. Here is a video performance that embodies the characteristics of Japanese music that were mentioned. And while Gagaku is still being performed with traditional Japanese instruments today, Japan also began an effort to adopt Western music aspects. Ever since the Meiji Restoration, Japanese music continued to be influenced by the West throughout the centuries. Music started to become more tonal and pitch-based, and now used harmony and chord progressions. The use of harmonies in Japanese contemporary music is rather complex, And you'll barely ever hear a plain major or minor chord, unlike other popular genres. At minimum, there would be major or minor sevenths and constant modulations or chromaticism. They also started to adopt Western instrumentation and began writing music for larger ensembles. Japanese music also started to incorporate more emotional elements as well, defying the concept of ma by rather filling in the space. Despite the Western influence, one element that was preserved from traditional Japanese music is its use of the pentatonic scale, and it's what gives the music the Asian sound. Here's an example of a piece with these characteristics. You'll notice a lot of depth in harmony and chromaticism. Here's an example of a very famous song, also with instances of pentatonicism and chromaticism. 沈むように溶けてゆくように二人だけの空が広がる夜に It frequently uses the Neapolitan chord in a minor key. It also uses a very popular chord progression called the Koakuma Koroshinko progression, which is also known as the Royal Road progression. This expression in Japanese refers to an easy and painless way to do something. So in other words, this chord progression was the go-to chord progression, especially in Japanese pop music. These types of chord progressions usually don't have a strong tonic or home key like other genres, but instead are designed to feel floaty and dreamy, lacking a resolution in a pleasant way. Here's an example of a Japanese song that uses the Koakuma chord progression. And if that wasn't cool enough already, here's another song that uses the Koakuma chord progression. This will blow your brain. The end. To conclude the presentation, I will show you a clip of one of my favorite Japanese pieces ever. I have an entire playlist dedicated to finding different recordings and renditions of this piece. Hope you enjoyed this piece and hope you enjoyed my presentation. Bye bye!